Hey everyone, thanks for joining me today. I am going to be going over pain and hopefully helping you. Hey everyone, I'm going to be going over pain and hopefully helping you understand a little bit more about when you feel pain, what does it mean? I talk to a lot of you and a lot of other clients about pain and what it means when we experience pain. And I feel like it's important for you to have a reference and something that you can go back and listen to understand it a little bit better. So I wanted to make this video for that. So when we talk about pain, it is important to understand that pain is a alarm for our body, right? So it's really needed. It's important that we have pain so that when we touch something hot, so that we step on something sharp or cut our finger, we have the ability to take our hand away or take our foot away without further damage. We have pain for, not overstressing our body, and our body does what it can to not become overstressed and become damaged. So it's important to understand that it's a really important part of our physiology. So what I want to go with next is that, the difference between functional and dysfunctional pain would be that when you have dysfunctional pain, that pain isn't really in the spectrum of how much pain you have for the amount of stimulus. So for example, if someone just brushes the top of your hand and you feel like it is hot lava or something that's extremely painful, that is disproportionate from the amount of stress or irritation that's going on in your body. So that's important to understand. Another thing to understand is when our body gets injured, it makes sense for you to have pain because you've had tissue damage. I'll get into how that doesn't necessarily always cause pain, but when you have tissue damage, acute injury, an issue that kind of comes on, and then you have healing, when that tissue is healed and it's strengthened and you have the mobility and the strength, that pain should go away. And when it doesn't go away, that is again kind of a dysfunctional thing, and that means that it's something's going on with your pain response to stimulus. So I just mentioned that you don't necessarily have to have tissue injury for pain, and you don't have to have pain for tissue injury. So some examples that kind of back this up, or things that I like to have people think about is, one of the big ones is when someone has an amputation. So if someone has an amputation of their arm or their leg, and then all of a sudden they have what's called phantom limb pain. So they have pain, say, you have your leg cut off, you have pain specifically in your big toe, or you feel like your foot is cramping or your calf is cramping and you can't, or it's someone's digging something into your foot that's no longer there. Well, that's because because the part of your body is still in your brain. You have a part of your brain called the homunculus that has an outline of what every part of our body in its sensory and its motor. So we're going to talk about sensory. And so it has that sensory awareness. So then what happens is if that part of your brain kind of goes off, it will, and your body feels threatened and it doesn't have the proper feedback to tell you, okay, no, it's okay, it's going to feel pain, even though that you don't have that tissue there. So next, there have been people who have bulging discs, torn ACLs, torn rotator cuffs, knee degeneration, hip degeneration, and they don't have any symptoms. They have an MRI and they find all these things, but they don't have any pain. They've actually done studies and they've taken images of all these different people that are non-symptomatic, and a good amount of those people, I don't know the numbers quite off the top of my head, but a good amount of those people had tissue damage. So again, the degeneration, bulging, tearing, all that stuff, but they didn't have the discomfort. And then another example is if you've ever found a bruise and have no idea where it came from. So that's tissue damage. That's a broken blood vessel that's bleeding inside of you. And if you don't know, it doesn't hurt and you don't know where it came from, that means that there was really not enough pain there. Or excuse me, there was no pain experienced. So if I didn't give a good example for either of those, pain without tissue damage or tissue damage without pain, let me know and I'll try and give you another example. So when it comes to pain and stimuli, so that's tissue damage, tension, stress on the body, perceived overexertion, whatever. What happens is you have a threshold, or you have a signal, and when you start to have that increased stress or that injury, what happens is that signal starts to go up until it hits a threshold. And once it hits a threshold, that's when our body responds. So until it hits that threshold, the body's like, yeah, I see you. It's not a big deal, not a big deal. And then it hits that threshold, and it's like, okay, we need to address this. That's when the smoke alarm goes off, the fire alarm. So that's a great analogy for pain, is that when smoke comes into the house from cooking or something, or a small fire, it is detected by the smoke alarm, but it's not enough to set it off, right? So once that smoke gets enough where it is a large fire, or a fire that is enough to create damage, it's enough smoke that it creates enough input to the fire alarm for the fire alarm to go off. And that's kind of how pain works when it comes to our body and the stress it gets under. So that's kind of how it works with a threshold. So from there, what can happen, unfortunately, is it can get sensitive. Whether it's the nerves itself in that area, so like your foot, your hip, your leg, your arm, or whether it is parts of your spine or your brain that gets sensitive. So, for example, if it's your foot that becomes sensitive, then it's going to be anything. So say you injure your foot and it becomes sensitive. Anything that touches your foot, so sometimes like putting on compression socks, that can be enough to create pain if it's a sensitized area. If it is the spine that is sensitized, anything from that pathway, and I can talk about a picture of that pathway, that anywhere in that distribution of that level of the spine can create sensitivity, and any touch to that area will feel really uncomfortable and painful, even though it's just touch and not something that should be painful. So that's called a sensitization. When it comes to your brain being sensitive, that's kind of like a CEO that is what is it called? Micromanaging, or keeping an eye on a certain level of the company. So the example I give is if someone is in the mailroom, and the mailroom forgets to deliver a really important message to the engineers, the CEO is going to go to that mailroom and say, you better never mess up, I'm going to be watching you. And so same thing, like if you hurt your hip, and your brain is going to be like, all right, we need to make sure that this hip works, and it's going to be much more cognizant of that area. It's going to create possible response to any sort of stimuli or any motion in that hip. It may jump to respond by alerting you, even though you may not need it. And so that's kind of where the fire alarm is a little bit extra sensitive. So if the fire alarm went off because of a kitchen fire, you got your kitchen nice and renovated, you still have the same fire alarm, but then you're cooking in your kitchen, and just the sizzling of bacon creates the alarm, enough signal for the alarm to go off. And so we don't want that sensitization. We need to figure out ways to improve it. You can also, with the brain and the spine, have something called referral pain. And what that is when the brain is not certain where the signal is coming from, the stress signal. So for example, people with stress in their low back their brain is not quite used to experiencing like that specific area of their back, and what it is used to experiencing is parts of its leg. And what can happen is it can send pain down the leg in response to an irritation in your low back. And so it's not really that your leg is the problem, but your low back is causing the pain in your leg, and it can create that sensitivity again down the leg, where you experience knee pain, thigh pain, foot pain because of a sensitization in your back. So yeah, so that also talks about if you do have an injury, it kind of creates a storm, a perfect storm. So when you do have an injury, what happens is I was talking about a picture in your brain. That picture in your brain can actually have a smudge in it, right? After you've had an injury. So I like to think about that as if you had a watercolor painting and someone took a a thumbprint and smudged across that picture, and now it's like blurry. Um, and so that overactive CEO doesn't have a clear signal of what's going on in the body, and then it doesn't have a clear it doesn't have a clear picture of what's going on. The sensitive nerves are sending signals, and it's like it creates that perfect storm where it creates a sensitization, and it creates a storm of where things that shouldn't hurt do hurt. And we have to address those through different motions, through different modalities, trying to re-educate the brain, re-educate the body to learn how to take stress there. All right, so that also kind of talks about why you have repeat pain. So for example, someone who has a back strain from lifting something heavy, this is just again from the back, and then years later they bend over and pick something up out of the dishwasher, and their back spasms as if they were picking up something heavy. They didn't injure something. They probably didn't bulge something. Probably what happened is their body experienced the stretching of the muscle, the position of the joint, and it doesn't have a clear picture of the back in its brain, and that sensitization, that repeated position, and then that fogginess in the brain kind of created a situation where your body was like, I don't know about this, we need to protect, and it sent the signal of pain and spasm of your muscles, because that's what your muscles do when they try to protect, is they spasm. So it kind of creates, again, another perfect storm for repeat discomfort. So I also wanted to talk about different reasons why you might experience pain. So obviously we talked about how tissue injury can create pain, overstress can create pain, but when those things aren't kind of going on, like if you're just sitting there, or if you are just sitting there, what are the reasons why you might be just experiencing a resting ache in a certain area? So there's a couple different reasons. You could be in a position that your body is interpreting as bad. So that's just a position. You could be under a amount of stress emotionally. When you are emotionally stressed, it creates inflammation in our body. When we have inflammation, those signals get so how our body interprets those signals is by opening channels in our nerves. And those nerves are so sensitive and so wired to kind of communicate to the brain, and the brain is so ready to kind of communicate back pain alert, that even just those stress and those inflammation signals into the nerve will create a response of pain. And that's the same way it works. Like if you feel, if you have a cold or if you have the flu, and you have pain in your back or your knee or somewhere that bothers you on a consistent basis, people complain of the weather, the barometric pressure. So if we're experiencing, so think about if you're sitting, that changes the pressure compared to when you're standing, compared to when you're laying down. That affects people's pain. But think about the pressure in the atmosphere and how it creates pressure on our body. And when your nerves experience that pressure, what it is they experience that pressure. But again, the brain and those nerves are so used to communicating and alerting in pain that it responds, and you feel that ache. If you eat food that increases your inflammation, your whole body gets inflamed, but those nerves are so, again, used to sending the information to the brain receiving that information from those nerves and be like, oh, it's those nerves again. Let's alert them and let them know, hey, like move, do something, get out of this pain, or get out of this stressful area. You could also have different stimuli, visual stimuli, balance stimuli, auditory. You could have cold, hot, or vibration. All those things can affect your pain experience. I feel like it's really, really important to understand that all those things can create the pain. So if you're just sitting there and it doesn't necessarily mean that your workout bothered you, but it was more that you just ate a hamburger and fries and now your hip is aching. So it wasn't necessarily the workout, it was your diet that inflamed you, and now that inflammation is creating that irritation. Or maybe it's because you didn't get a lot of sleep that night. Or maybe it's because you just had a really stressful day at work. So all these things combine and come together to create a situation where you're firing these nerves, and the brain is interpreting them based off of its experience, its memory. You know, all of this is subconscious. None of this is of our conscious mind, or else we'd say, I don't want to feel this pain, and it would go away. So all this subconscious stuff is going on, and you experience that discomfort instead of just kind of living. And so this is why, you know, when people want to get out of pain completely forever, I have to kind of dampen their expectations, because unfortunately, you know, when the weather changes, when you get sick, when you eat bad, when you are super stressed, you may experience kind of a feeling of discomfort, a feeling of tension in your muscles, because they're trying to protect you. So it's important to understand that, so that you can be really mindful of what's going on. Like, you know, was it my workout, or was it just that I ate a bag of Doritos? Was it my workout, or do I need to take some calming breaths to relax my body and get into a better state? So it's really important, and I hope this really helped you understand. And if there's anything else I can add, or if there's questions you have, feel free to email me, and I will do my best to answer as much as I can. And if there's something that continues, I'll add to this video and make sure that you guys get the information. All right, I hope this was helpful. I hope that it helps you understand your pain a little bit better, and going forward, you will be able to be more mindful and have a better, less stressful experience when it comes to discomfort and pain.